It's a philosophy one today, okay? It's going to be a long video. It's going to be a little bit philosophical, okay? I want to draw a foundation for cooking and why I think cooking, amongst other things, is incredibly important to heal the severed relationship we have with the world in modern times as modern men, modern people. Start us with Martin Heidegger. The consumption of all material, including the raw material man, is determined in a concealed way by the complete emptiness in which beings are suspended. This emptiness has to be filled up by the unconditional possibility of production, the production of everything. The only way to escape this emptiness is to endlessly order and arrange beings as to guarantee incessant, aimless activity. We see the world in a certain way. We order Amazon packages, they arrive at our door. We turn on the shower and let it run for 45 minutes. We go to the grocery store and everything is prepared for us. This innate foundation, if you will call it, creates a mindset or worldview that doesn't allow you to see past it. Insofar as showers, Amazon packages, and supermarket veggies, they're much more elaborate and much more complicated than just going somewhere and picking them up or accessing them at any instant. And I'll say quickly, cooking for me is the opposite of this mindset. Good cooking, anyways, is about going all the way down to the source. And I share a quick story, which goes to show this fact. The first day I worked in a kitchen was the first day when I realized that bacon was pork belly, sliced thinly and smoked, right? You have the objects in the world, things in the world, pork, for example, and there's a complete disconnect from most people's understanding of the things they're consuming and the things themselves. And so cooking repairs this connection. I continue. We say with more Heidegger here. The hydroelectric plant is set into the current of the Rhine. It sets the Rhine to supplying its hydraulic press, which then sets up the turbines turning. The turning sets those machines in motions whose thrust sets going the electric current for which a long-distance power station and its networks of cables are set up to dispatch electricity. In the context of the interlocking process pertaining to the orderly disposition of electrical energy, even the Rhine itself appears as something at our command. From the question concerning technology. The Rhine River is a famous European river. It goes through the Riesling wine region of Germany, near Strasbourg in France, the north of France. And it is a natural beauty. The Rhine River is a thing of beauty. Now what Heidegger is getting at here is that the moment we see the Rhine, we don't see it as a thing of beauty. We see it as something to be taken or used. Much like the shower head or the supermarket veggies or the Amazon packages. They're just things to be taken or used or commoditized. The question is often, can we and not should we? Produce, for me, which is the same natural beauty as the Rhine River, is something we see just to take advantage of, even as chefs sometimes. And this is why I want to lay the groundwork for this philosophy of cooking. You need to have a deep respect for the produce you're using because the mentality that precedes us, right, is that this farmland, these rivers, these vineyards are meant to create a product. And to walk the line of appreciation and creating a product is how you create an ecological relationship to the world and to your products. And now I give you some French because I practice a little bit, okay? Don't kill me for my accent, huh?
On est pris entre deux feux. Je suis aussi allergique au dévote Heidegger qu'un Heideggerian de service.
And what Derrida is saying here is that, in English, the philosophy of Martin Heidegger has a lot of say in all modern philosophy. And he neither likes the pro-Heideggerian or the anti-Heideggerian. And I can let you do your own research on Martin Heidegger and why he might say this. But for me, it's probably this question of technology, which is what he's talking about. The ontology of Martin Heidegger, Sein und Zeit, for example, being in time, is so incredibly profound that you can't walk away from it as a philosopher in the 21st century. But with his later works, and as he goes further, he takes these stances on technology and the human epoch that we're in, right? And he makes people a little bit afraid because he brings into question maybe a conservatism or something like this. A moderation with our progress, right? He's asking us to take a step back, as you've seen with these previous quotes from Heidegger I've read. To take a step back and look at what's happening. To see and to unfold the holes of our ideology and get a grasp on the things that are hard to grasp or maybe can't be grasped. And as we move further and further into the future, right, generation after generation, these concepts do begin to die, meaning that we're not on a farmstead anymore. It's not the 1800s where you're raising and killing and slaughtering and cooking, right? These inherent life-giving relationships fade away as everything is automized, as more efficient means are developed, right? But what is left at the wayside during this is not the productivity, but it's the way that it affects how you think and how you interact with the world. And so this is the majority of the philosophical part being complete. And we're going to get into actually cooking now. And so we've talked about Martin Heidegger already, but we're going to talk about something else that's very strange in philosophy and what led to my discovering of cooking, actually. There is a certain part of German philosophy after German idealism and after Arthur Schopenhauer where you have two offshoots of Schopenhauer. Famously, Friedrich Nietzsche. And then the other, forgotten brother, Rudolf Steiner. I was very lucky to read Rudolf Steiner and bump into his book called Agriculture. Now, it makes no sense, right, that we're dealing with German philosophy and then somehow in this deep history of German philosophy comes out one of the most well-known and renowned agricultural philosophers, if you will. It's very strange, okay? And he, of course, created this philosophy of agriculture called biodynamics. And he writes, and as you can imagine, this is a generation before Martin Heidegger. Perhaps there was some influence. Rudolf Steiner writes, under the influence of our modern philosophy of materialism, it is agriculture, believe it or not, that has deviated furthest from any truly rational principles. Indeed, not many people know that during the last 2 decades, the agricultural products on which our life depends have degenerated extremely rapidly. And he says this also about farms and agriculture. Now, a farm comes closest to its own essence when it can be conceived of as a kind of independent, individually and self-contained entity. So this is obviously incredible, right? And way ahead of its time. But it's almost prophetic in a way. It's almost looking into the future in a way. You have people that see nutrient-dense fields and they say, how can we take the most out of this, right? Well, you have a nutrient-rich field, you're going to spray herbicides, fungicides, pesticides all over it, right? And ultimately, what goes to the wayside is what you're actually doing, the effects you're having onto the field that you're using. We never consider to ask, what are we doing here that could be negative? Because our mindset is oriented around productivity. And what we're looking for is not to... We're looking to humble ourselves. That's what the goal of the project of Rudolf Steiner is, in my opinion. He says, the idea that we are exploiting land when we farm is quite accurate. In fact, such exploitation is unavoidable because with everything we send off the farm and out into the world, we are taking away from the forces of the soil and even the air, which need to be replenished eventually. Huge, right? Even when you're doing biodynamics, you're taking away from the world. You're taking away from the ground. So this for me is, we're coming back. We're going back into our relationship with the world that understands that there is a give and take to some degree, right? And so just a little bit about my life, right? At this point, I was maybe 20 years old before I had started cooking, reading lots of philosophy, reading lots of books, 10,000 pages a year, right? Eating fast food, following the traditional bodybuilding activities of calories in, calories out. And this is when I started to open my eyes a little bit, okay? Some things cannot be read about or taught. They have to be seen and experienced firsthand, right? And so when I went into cooking, this is when it started to open my eyes, right? You start to see the whole processes of things. You start to realize how much we try to take advantage of things that ultimately lead to our own demise and our own bad health, etc. Because the world, systems of philosophy, they don't function this way. They're not something you can just completely take over. You can't just spray fungicides and pesticides on everything and everything is going to be okay. It's not how it works, right? And so I decided to jump into a kitchen, right? Again, I go back to the bacon because that one is just huge for me. Bacon is sliced pork belly which has been smoked and aged, right? Many people don't even know that. And it's about one of the most innate, intimate things in our life, what we eat. And it's not time for me to get into this right now, but these technological aspects of our life affect much more than just the food. But it is, in German, we say Weltanschauung or Weltanschauungskrieg, worldview, and worldview war, right? If you can't interact with these things, if you can't start to think about these things, that's where the real damage happens. It's the xanthan gums, preservatives, and supermarket shelf life that no one begins to question because it's slowly fading into something that is pre-rational, that no one cares about and no one will care about because that's just how it is. And so when you start to cook and you start to deal with fresh products, that's when you realize things are a little different than you think. Cooking for me is a way to heal this alienation we have from the world. And it's not a surprise to me that many great chefs get into farming, get into sourcing very efficiently and very well. Because when you talk about beauty and when you talk about cooking, it starts right there, right? For someone like me who, felt very alienated from the world and from meaning and purpose, cooking was the antidote to heal that severed relationship. Because as I said, it connects you right away with the world around you. And especially as you get good at it, it really forces you to take everything into consideration. Sourcing, butchering, cooking, saucing, serving. And it's because cooking is not just heating up food, but it's about understanding that relationship. And that seriously changed my life. So we've covered a decent bit of philosophy today. And I hope that can help other people understand the importance of cooking and the goal we should have when we cook. At the most intimate level for me, we start and begin to heal with good cooking a relationship to the world. And slowly it starts to break down this technological mind that we have that believes that we can just take whatever we want from anywhere and do whatever we want because, we're the human overlords. When in reality, what we need, just like Rudolf Steiner, is to be humbled a little bit. We'll see if any of this even makes sense, if it makes it in the video, but thank you for watching. And that's a bit of a philosophical understanding of cooking. Okay, it's a few weeks later, and I want to do a little bit more of an in-depth philosophy part of this, okay? It's going to be quick. Just for anyone who cares and wants to follow along with this, they can know my philosophical mindset with no holding back on things that are hard to understand. There are principles in ideology that are subliminal, meaning that we don't interact with them rationally. They're just things that we have taken in our mind, in our ideological mind, to be kind of foundational. We don't look at them and we don't see them. You see this, for example, with kids growing up. The way they conceptualize the world is different than previous generations, and that's because what supersedes the way they think influences how they act. And so, for me, someone born in the year 2000, right? A lot of these principles, the super rational, the things that supersede your rationality, they directly alienate you. So as I said, you're no longer on the farmstead, so you're just going to the supermarket, and this is your way of interacting with the world. It's completely alienated. And so I brought up those Heidegger quotes because Heidegger characterizes that alienation very well, right? In this human epoch, that is how we see the world, okay? And it's a very scary thing. And so why is cooking important? Because cooking forces you to break down these super rational concepts, okay? It forces you to interact directly with the world. And so then you start to realize, right? Water does not just flow out of shower heads. There's an elaborate process behind it. And nothing reveals it, as I said, as much as cooking, because you really, as I've gotten really deep into cooking, you start to care about agriculture. And then you see the work that goes into your cauliflower, your chard, your saffron. Everything is incredibly, incredibly complex. And the relationships you have to be tempered. They have to be approached with moderation. And it's this moderation that you understand with cooking and with good products that brings you closer to the world and having a positive relationship with the world. I would characterize the modern man to be alienated from the world, from other people, from God, etc. And it's because of those super rational blocks that we've inherited, because of the technological system, because of the conception of the world from people before us. This is a much more complicated question in philosophy. But this is, for me, why cooking is important. It connects you with the world around you and eventually with God, because God is this rationality, this connection to the world, right? The good connection to the world. Anyways, so that's me not holding back. Thank you guys for watching.